Welcome to CAM Radio, an Ahead of the Curve initiative by Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas, bringing you every Friday the latest in legal and policy. Stay tuned. Enjoy listening.
Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. India's healthcare market is set to reach close to $650 billion by 2025. But it can be complex, keeping in mind India's huge and diverse population, and its citizens may be plagued by healthcare challenges as well, with India set to be having one of the highest medical inflation rates in Asia. So what are some of the regulatory mechanisms in place that need to be scrutinized? What are the potential gaps that need to be plugged to evolve India's healthcare landscape? Can the capping of prices of essential medicines have positive or negative connotations? Does drug promotion necessitate self-regulation or more stringent government oversight? And as healthcare costs seem to rise, who is accountable? Is the pharma industry to blame for escalating expenses, or are there deeper and more systemic issues at play? And what does it really take for India's healthcare regime to do no harm? To break it all down and more, please help me welcome Ashwin Sapra, partner and head of Pharma Healthcare and Life Sciences at Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Ashwin, it's my sheer pleasure and privilege to have you at the CAM Radio episode. I'm looking forward to a very meaningful conversation. We've had very interesting episodes around different sectors, and just given the vibrancy of pharma, healthcare, and life sciences, I'm sure we'll have a very meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Shrija, for having me on the podcast. It's wonderful to be here.
Ashwin, let's just begin from something which is really the elephant in the room, which really is the Drugs Price Control Order, popularly called as the DPCO, which essentially aims to cap the prices of essential medicines with the goal of making them available to citizens at low prices. I want to understand from you that what really has the effect of DPCO been? Have drugs really become all that accessible and affordable at all?
So before that, let me tell you, the Drugs Price Control Order is not a new legislation, so to speak. It's been there since the 70s, when the government sort of wanted to ensure that the populace of India has essential drugs available to them at affordable prices, given the fact that prices of drugs are sometimes extremely prohibitive. So the DPCO essentially came in about, I think it came in 1970, and it's gone through different versions. The latest version of the 2013 started off with just a few set of drugs. I think there's about 30 or 35 drugs which are under price control. And today there are 360 plus drugs, if I'm not mistaken, under this particular legislation. The objective, again, like I said, was to make these drugs easily affordable and accessible, because the pricing order has provisions that where a drug is under price control, a manufacturer has to continue to make them at that price and make them available to the people. The biggest example of the positive result of this has been that, a lot of cancer drugs, which were very prohibitively expensive earlier, I think there's about 1,500 cancer drugs in packs and combinations. Immediately, this inclusion of these drugs into the price control resulted in about 30% reduction in prices. Prices of stents, cardiac stents, which were quite high earlier, they came down to almost 30% of the original value. Prices of orthopedic implants came down as well. So yes, prices of these essential life-saving drugs and medical devices have come down. They have been made more accessible to patients who otherwise could not have accessed those and use those. There has been a positive shift in its objective. Obviously, there is a flip side too as well, and we'll discuss that as we go forward. But to answer your question, yes, it has increased the accessibility and affordability of the identified drugs and medical devices.
Thanks for that, Ashwin. And as you sort of pointed out, that especially for cancer drugs, which could otherwise be very, very non-affordable and expensive, so there have been positive side. But this is really from the consumer perspective. I want to understand from you that how have pharma companies taken to this, and have they readily and very happily adapted themselves to the DPCO regime, or has there been some hesitation in this regard?
So it's a mixed bag. A lot of drugs were profit making item points for a lot of pharma companies, and there's really nothing wrong in that, because the amount of research and development, the amount of financial input that goes into developing a new blockbuster drug, it's phenomenal. It goes into hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, a pharma company has to recoup that investment. There are different schools of thought about it. One school says that are they justified in pricing their products so high that they can't reach the people who need them? There's another school which says there should be a median way between pricing and availability, and you should give some products free of cost to people who can't afford them. Then, of course, there's the third school which says that no, you are in it to help humanity, so therefore you have to keep everything priced really low. Now, obviously, the DPCO sort of attempts to cast that midway where it imposes a pricing mechanism on companies. Now, the result is that, in my view, is that pharma companies sort of tend to shy from introducing their blockbuster products into India, especially in the cancer space, in the diabetes space, which are big lifestyle. Diabetes is a big lifestyle sort of disease in India, and instances of cancer are also increasing. So they shy away from introducing these new products, and with the result, we don't get the latest blockbuster products. I'll give you an example. There are now these diabetes drugs which are now related to extreme weight loss. They are extremely highly priced abroad, and companies are considering bringing them to India, but then again they're scared of that the government may at some point in time put them in the price control legislation, so that reduces their top line profits. But I think the biggest, like I said, issue is bringing new blockbuster products into India for fear of them eventually coming under price control, and then that affects the profit top line. So that, I feel, is the biggest sort of issue. Companies are adapting themselves to this. They are planning their financial outlays with the assumption that it may happen that the government may put their products under price control. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. The government will issue notifications that the following drugs are being considered for price control. Companies are required to give their pricing to the DPCO regulator, and then they're allowed to make their case as to why or why not their products should be included under the price control regime. And that's where companies come and make out a case about the unique values of their drug, the differences of their drug from the drug product that is being sought to be put under price control. So there are ways and means in which there are interactions with the regulator. Sometimes the companies do succeed in convincing the regulator. Sometimes they don't. When they don't, then of course they explore other means, including going to court to try and sort of get the court to understand that their products are different from the products that the government wants to put under price control, and therefore those particular products should not be under price control. So it's sort of a mixed bag.
Thanks for that, Ashwin. And this is very interesting. And you've shared a very clear picture on essentially both the pros and the cons, basically from the consumer side, and what really are pharma companies reacting to it, and what really are the on the ground real challenges. So I really want to understand, it's a great segue to our next question now, with DPCO as a context, and that's really playing in the background. So one to understand the primary challenges in drug pricing and availability in India. So does that mean that the natural fallout of that really is that the pharma companies are now focusing on perhaps unregulated but related drugs? Can one say that?
So see, before that, you have to understand, when the government identifies a particular drug product as a product which would be subject to the price control regime, pharma companies look at at different variants of products. So you know that companies have different variants of the same drug product. So for example, if you have you have a paracetamol with an ibuprofen combination, so that's one drug product. You have a simpliciter paracetamol combination, that's another drug product. So if a paracetamol product is under price control, the provisions of the DPCO state that for a drug to be included under price control, it has to be specifically mentioned in its chemical form, its dosage form, its format, tablet or capsule or syrup, what have you, in that form, in the price control order. Now, what pharma companies essentially do, and what we help do is identify whether or not a particular product comes within those specific parameters or not. There have been judgments of the court which say that if your product is not within those parameters, then the price regime does not apply to it. Now, that was the situation prior to November 2022. Post that, there was an amendment to the DPCO wherein they sort of put in one line which says any form is included. But again, there is litigation going on against that, especially in the Delhi High Court. And we are yet to see how that comes out. But right now, what companies try to do is try to steer out of that particular set of parameters so that an argument can be made that, look, our product is outside these identified parameters, therefore it is not a scheduled formulation, which is the term used for drugs that come under the price control order. It's always a back and forth with the regulator, because we've had a lot of cases where I myself have gone and explained to the regulator that this product is not within the parameters, but the regulator takes it that if the name is there, then every dosage form of ingestion is included. So it's a back and forth. We are waiting for some judicial interpretation of this, but till then, again, the industry has this notion that if it's included in the parameters, then only can the product be included under price control. If it's not, then it's out of it. So again, we'll wait to see how that goes out.
So it's like a constant slugfest, is it, between the regulator and the pharma company?
Yes. But in this situation, I would define the term slugfest as a very pleasant / sometimes unpleasant exchange of opinions. I'm talking from personal experience.
Okay. So Ashwin, do you see this as a good thing or a bad thing for pharma companies and, of course, Indian citizens at large?
Drugs at low prices, easy availability, definitely a very good thing for Indian citizens. Drugs at low prices and forced to ensure that they're available, not so much of a good thing for the companies. But then again, we have to understand that we're in a country where there is so much parity between the ability of citizens to purchase essential drugs. There's such a divide between the rich, the super rich, the middle class, the lower middle class, the poor, and everything. So it has to be it's a good thing for those who can't afford it. It's a bad thing for companies because they're not getting to I recover their expenses. But then again, I think it has to be a median way. I think there has to be dialogue between the regulator and the industry. The industry is not heartless. They have to talk to the industry and they have to sort of come to some sort of a median way whereby it works for both. The industry has, a lot of companies have these patient assistance programs where they give their blockbuster drugs to patients for free. I know there are a lot of MNC companies which give these cancer treatment, the entire treatment regime for a particular patient goes into tens and 20s of lakhs of rupees, and they've given those for free. So I think it's very important for it to be good for everybody across the board. There has to be constant dialogue between the regulator and the companies. It should not be a knee-jerk reaction. And most importantly, there has to be complete evaluation of how is it panning out on the field. And I'll give you an example. The government reduced the prices of cardiac stents and orthopedic implants to almost 1/3 the value. This caused a furor in the medical devices industry. Have the prices come down of the products? Yes. But has the overall cost of, say, implanting a stent or implanting an orthopedic implant come down? The answer is no, because what's happened is the price of the product has come down, but the overall treatment cost has gone up. So again, it's the effect of reducing the price of the equipment has not had the desired effect. So I think one needs to review that, and one needs to sort of take measures to at least ensure that the objectives of DPCO are being met.
These are like very, very real challenges on the ground, and the way you're sort of outlining them. And you had this expression that the pharma companies are not heartless. Well, one can understand where they are coming from, but the reality is that look at the kind of country that we are dealing with, where the healthcare costs are already too high. What really is our per capita income, and the host of socio-ideological challenges that one has to deal with. So there's actually very real, deep issues that we are talking about here. We've spent quite a bit of time on pricing, drug control, understanding the point of view from the pharma companies and the impact for the Indian citizens. Let's take this conversation a little and spend some bit of time on drug quality. I mean, there have been reports of children fatalities in some African countries because of alleged quality issues with some cough syrups manufactured in India. I want to understand from you, Ashwin, since then, how has India's legal framework for drug manufacturing changed or improved to avoid something like that happening again?
Sure. Yes, I think those set of incidents was quite a disturbing, I would say, sort of a black mark in the history of our industry, especially when, there is this objective to make India the pharmacy of the world. See, drug quality issues have always been existent. We have provisions under existing law, the Drugs and Cosmetics Act and the drugs rules, whereby quality standards have been laid down. Unfortunately, these standards have not been followed. And they've not been followed by a lot of the medium to low scale manufacturers. The top end of the industry, everybody takes this very seriously. The medium to low end manufacturers sometimes shy away from complying completely because of the prohibitive costs that are associated in having such high level quality control mechanisms. And trust me, quality control mechanisms in terms of what are those set out by the US FDA are far, far higher. So we've had good manufacturing practices which are part of our regulatory regime. Post this cough syrup incidents, the regulator has sort of taken a lot of proactive steps in ensuring that there is very strict quality compliance. Of course, there have been a lot of criminal actions taken against the wrongdoers. I won't get into that, but yes, they have taken a lot of action. The good manufacturing practices guidelines have been made more stringent. There have been amendments made in these practice guidelines to ensure that drug quality meets standards. There has been enhanced inspection and enforcement of these quality standards. Steps have been taken, but again, I think they need to do more. There has to be more enforcement, and wherever there is even the slightest instance of non-compliance, that really needs to be nipped in the bud. We have to ensure that the world believes that we are capable of making quality drugs, and that is the case. We are, and we will continue making quality drugs. And our regulator knows that, and they're sort of taking proactive steps towards that.
Thanks for that, Ashwin. That's sort of very well put. And you made your point very clear that there is absolutely no leniency to be shown to bad actors when it comes to drug quality issues. I also wanted to get your viewpoint on the general perception about pharma companies, just like from an armchair perspective, when sort of you think about pharma companies, the first image that comes to your mind really are of behemoths or larger companies. Some of them are actually publicly listed also now. But in India, there are also a large number of pharma companies in the MSME sector. And it is actually said that about 65% of these firms manufacturing drugs not of standard quality. What do you think these MSMEs are having trouble maintaining these high quality standards? And do you see any specific solution that wouldn't compromise on quality and compliance coming from them?
So you see, again, like I said, the primary issue with the which the MSME sector faces is the high and prohibitive cost of maintaining these quality standards. Does that mean that they shouldn't do it? That's not the answer. There has to be support from the government. At the end of the day, it is the government which is telling the world that we are the pharmacy of the sector. So you have to support these MSME entities, whether it's by way of low interest loans or government support, whatever it is. You have to support them to ensure that they come up to the book in terms of maintaining the quality standards. The second aspect is, and again related to cost, is testing of product samples. Now, testing equipment is extremely expensive. You cannot expect a small MSME entity to have testing equipment worth hundreds of crores in their testing labs because it's not there. So what is the solution? The government needs to increase the number of government-affiliated NABL certified testing laboratories where people can send their samples for testing. Third, as far as the rules in terms of export of drugs is concerned, those rules need to be made very stringent. But again, the effectivity will only be there because when the entities are able to sort of send their products for testing at subsidized rates. So the government needs to sort of put some money into that bag, so to speak, to ensure that they are supported in complying. Nobody wants to not comply. Everybody wants to comply because it's a question of the country's reputation, and obviously nobody wants to get into trouble like these guys did. So definitely the government has to support the sector if they want to ensure that these MSMEs maintain high quality standards, and I think a separate policy for this has to come out. In this, maybe that's something for the Honorable Finance Minister to consider in her next budget speech that's going to happen in August.
Let's hope that. Let's hope for that. So Ashwin, what I'm understanding from the conversation, and I also wanted to ask you this, that just given the norms of the drug policy, you also mentioned the high cost of producing these drugs, the cost of compliance. Do all these factors then perhaps conclude or sort of board themselves well for saying that it basically is a winner takes all market in the pharma space? Will the big become bigger, just given the constraints one is working with from a company's perspective? I'm asking.
I don't think so. What's going to happen, and what I'm seeing now is that there is a lot of activity in terms of the foreign companies tying hands with the local domestic manufacturers, the foreign companies using our domestic manufacturing capabilities. As the law progresses and as the law progresses to cater to what are the requirements today, I think the effect is going to be on everybody equally. Quality control issues are going to affect everybody equally. Pricing is going to affect everybody equally, probably the innovators more than the generics. And also, marketing practices are going to affect everybody equally. So I think the playing field to some extent is level for everybody. Everybody needs to sort of tweak up their business models. And the biggest example is, the kind of deal activity that we are seeing in the industry. It is on a positive upswing. So I think everybody's sort of, waiting and watching what are going to be the next few policy decisions, starting with the budget.
Interesting. All eyes on the budget now.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you sort of also mentioned marketing, and it is also very, very important that we discuss marketing, just given the kind of huge role that it plays, especially in the dissemination of messaging for pharma products. And recently, the Department of Pharmaceuticals issued the Uniform Code for Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Practices, popularly labeled as UCPMP. It essentially has a flavor of a mandatory code over its predecessor. How effective do you think would this new code actually be in regulating marketing and promotional practices in the industry?
So UCPMP is now the biggest sort of I won't say point of concern, but the biggest flavor of concern in the industry in this quarter. See, the UCPMP was previously issued because there was a hue and cry about promotional practices being followed by the industry. And when I mean the industry, I mean the pharmaceutical, healthcare, life sciences, medical devices industry in terms of their interactions with healthcare professionals. There were a lot of allegations that companies were giving a lot of extraneous considerations to healthcare professionals to prescribe their products, which is not in the best interest of the patient. Obviously, I have a separate view on that. But the UCPMP now, in its recent avatar, it was introduced a few months ago. Sort of earlier on, it was more voluntary. It was more like a set of suggestive guidelines. It was not in the nature of a legislation. Now, still, it is not in the nature of a legislation, but the wording is a little more stringent. The responsibilities are fixed up more stringent. The reporting requirements are a little stronger, and there is a link to potential violations of other laws which may sort of trigger additional penalties. It's really rattled everybody, and it's sort of made everybody rethink their promotional activities and how they interact with the healthcare professionals. Again, now the whole debate around how does the industry affect the dispensation of medical advice has started again. And there are schools of thought which say the industry should not influence doctors. There's another school of thought which says that the industry has to educate doctors about new products so that doctors are made aware of the best treatment methods for their patients. And I think I subscribe to that there has to be interaction between the industry and the healthcare providers, because the industry keeps on developing new products and HCPs need to be kept in the loop on this. Now, should that cross into the domain of telling a doctor, look, you prescribe my drug and I will give you this as a quid pro quo? That should not be the case. But definitely there has to be interactions between doctors, and there are certain wrinkles in the UCPMP which need to be ironed out because, again, it affects the overall ability to interact with doctors and sort of give them the information that they need to give to patients. But it's a step in the right direction.
So essentially, it really is a thin line between education and influence. What perhaps could begin as education could very quickly leak into influence. And that could actually play a lot of danger for the pharma sector. And like you rightly pointed out, it is perhaps a step in the right direction, but we have to see where it sort of takes us. All of this, but then leads to the ultimate large question, and which has really been the moot point of conversation when it comes to pharma in this country, the rising cost of healthcare in India. What do you really think, Ashwin, as a close observant of this sector and a very active contributor in terms of policy making or the legalities in this space, have really been the systemic factors leading to the rising cost of healthcare? And to what extent do you think pharma companies' pricing strategies and very, very important health insurance are contributing to high healthcare costs?
See, that's another big issue that's happening, because this issue has now sort of been taken up by the Supreme Court of India as well. Yes, prices of drug products are increasing. Yes, prices of medical devices are increasing. More and more people are needing path-breaking drugs. Whether it's cancer treatment, diabetes, whether it's orthopedic implants, whether it's cardiac walls, cardiac stents, what have you. Yes, prices of healthcare are increasing. Charges of hospitalization charges are increasing. So all across the board, there is the ticker is sort of moving to the right. It's increasing. The government has government healthcare schemes in place, but I am a little I have a pessimistic view that it really doesn't reach the right people, or it doesn't reach the right people in the amount that is required by them. And also sometimes the healthcare industry, the hospital industry is blamed to sort of not honor these schemes. I think those things need to change. But again, the fact of the matter is that the government is taking steps to ensure that the costs of healthcare come down. Given our population, I don't think public healthcare is something which can work. The UK has public healthcare, but the cons is that you have to wait for a long time to even say have an MRI scan or what have you. So there will always be the private players in the industry who will be there, who will give you emergent and high quality healthcare. Is the same emergent and high quality healthcare available at government institutions? The infrastructure is there. Is it available? I have my doubts. You can go to any of the government hospitals and see the situation there. So people tend to go to the private hospitals. Now, charges of private hospitals has always been an issue. Even in a recent Supreme Court case where the court has had indicated that the government needs to sort of come out with some sort of a pricing policy. Otherwise, there was an indication they would have adopted the central government healthcare scheme rates, and that sort of literally, blew apart through the entire private hospital chain sector, and everybody was up in arms. Till obviously the Supreme Court sort of then subsequently indicated that it'll have to look at the matter in a more holistic purpose. So again, pricing of healthcare has to be something which has to be discussed with the private players, with the government, and implemented in a manner so that it is not prohibitive for patients to approach the hospitals. At the same time, it is not prohibitive for hospitals to make the investments that are required into providing those services. Huge investments are there. There's huge capital outlay which happens. Now, if you want a hospital to invest the money, there has to be a way in which that money can be recovered. Yes, they are serving a public function, but it is also in the nature of a business. So there has to be a balanced sort of viewpoint and a balanced way forward if you have to make healthcare accessible and affordable. And also health insurance is one big thing. I think there should be more focus on health insurance and how health insurance companies are charging patients in terms of premiums for services. So it has to be. I personally feel universal healthcare will never work in India.
I think the dark reality, if you frankly ask me, in my personal view, is that healthcare in this country is non-affordable, even by most. I would even include upper middle class here. I mean, look at the hospitals now. They almost look like hotels. It's a lifestyle question now, where you are mentioning to your guest over dinner table, okay, which hospital you went to, in which hospital you got your child delivered. So I think it's really moving away from a public service to a more vanity question now. And the minute the conversations start becoming like this, you actually get your guardrails up that perhaps this is where the private equity money has come in. And I wanted to ask you this question from a very, very 360-degree point of view also, and perhaps very, very high up, that Ashwin, do you really think that a service like hospitals and healthcare should even be open to private equity capital infusion? Because look at the capital structure here. You are raising money from an investor who has to return money to its LPs in 8 years. And just by virtue of that, he or she's gonna put the hospital owner on basically a treadmill, that you need to have that many billings, you need to have that many equipments, you need to make it a hotel, and ultimately who is bearing the cost? The consumer. So I really want to understand from you that can the balance actually be achieved in practical terms?
See, the biggest example would be to see the number of private equity deals that have happened. So I remember that I think in 2023, there was about, I think 20 or 25 private equity deals, which totally valued about $5 or $4.5 billion in India. So clearly there is interest of private equity. Why? Because again, given our population, given the fact that, like you rightly said, private healthcare is far more profitable in a sense, and people are going to private hospitals more. Why? Because of the lack of proper facilities in government hospitals. So I think private equity players are seeing this as a very lucrative market. And if you simply look at it as a business, they're probably looking at a very heavy return on investment. And that's why there is so much of private equity investment in hospital chains. We ourselves have done so much of private equity investment deals in a lot of Indian hospital chains. The only issue, and which I think must be keeping a lot of these investors awake at night, is there going to be a sudden shift in the regulatory policy which is going to affect their business? Like, for example, I took the example of this case in the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court said that we're going to regularize, we may look at setting price controls across the board. Now, all of a sudden, that affects, profitability, top lines. But again, I think given the sheer length and breadth of our country and the sheer population, and the fact that government healthcare is not up to the mark in most areas, and that's where the private sector has sort of made a foray in. I think private equity investments in the hospital space are definitely something which is sort of preferred by a lot of PE investors. And this is also tuning in with the global trends, because there have been deals totaling to about $60 billion in the healthcare delivery space. Mm-hmm. And I only see this increasing unless there is some major policy shift and suddenly, everything tanks.
Yeah, definitely it is. And I think fertility and IVF clinics are perhaps the new favorite for private equity players. On the question of deal making, Ashwin, I think we should spend perhaps the next 3 to 4 minutes on that. One is the hospital chain, just dissecting the healthcare sector, the hospital, the healthcare delivery, sort of one understands it's a great lucrative business. On pharma, from a due diligence perspective or from a deal-making perspective, what could be 2 or 3 considerations that an investor has to keep in mind, or a buyer or an M&A deal maker has to keep in mind, just given all of the above that we sort of discussed till now?
Sure. So I can count all of these on 10 fingers, but I'll give you the top 3. The first one is policy considerations. And you just mentioned IVF, and I'll give you an example of that. We were looking at a certain private equity deal in a big IVF chain. Everything was fine. Suddenly they had to back out because there were 2 new laws that came in affecting IVF and surrogacy. And the way the laws were worded, the implementation made conducting the business prohibitive. So the way the laws came out, even though the laws had a noble sort of intent to regulate IVF and surrogacy procedures, the laws literally threw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. So, the PE client sort of said that, look, we don't know where these laws are going to go. They're going to affect profitability. So therefore, they pulled out of the deal. So I think policies made by the government are pretty much a lot of they play a big role in decisions of private equity players and other investors as well. Example is again price control. We've had a situation where a PE player was very, very concerned about the effects of price control on the top 5 drug products of the client, of the target, because they said if these products are going to come under price control, then obviously profitability goes down, and our investment gets affected. So definitely, I think government policies play a key role, and that's what a lot of investors are worried and worried about. And the problem is the change in policies happens really, really fast. It happens very often. So that sort of keeps the agony alive. The second bit is obviously drug pricing, which definitely, like I said, affects the investments. And I think the third is this. The stance of the government, the Make in India initiative, that's good, that's excellent. It's promoting the domestic industry, but at the same time, a lot of foreign players feel that it's creating somewhat of an unfair sort of bias against foreign investment and foreign entities trying to do business in India. So that also sort of gives rise to some level of agony. And also the regulatory compliances that are in place sometimes make it prohibitive, and sometimes are cause of concern. But I think all of these issues, if a client were to sort of look at all of these issues, there are ways and means out. It only depends on, who's holding your hand as you're traversing the landscape here. There are ways and means out of it. There are ways in which you can have a dialogue with the government and with the regulator, and you can achieve your objective. And that's what I tell a lot of my clients, that, it may look as if it's unfavorable from a 50,000 foot, but, as you dive deeper into it, you'll see there are ways and means out of it. And once you understand the nuances and work with those nuances, the profits are there to be made. So it all depends on how you eventually look at it and deal with it in the end.
That's a very meaningful piece of advice coming in. And perhaps as long as Ashwin Sapra is holding your hand and traversing your way throughout, there are sort of ways and means to make money out of it. Is that the memo, Ashwin, is that the messaging to be sent across?
Yeah, you can delete the word Ashwin Sapra. Anybody, you have to have good people guiding your hand, and people who know how the industry functions, who know what are the intent behind the regulations, and most importantly, know their ways around it. Either you work with it, you live with it, or you fight it out before the courts and try and see, and get a good case out of the courts. It all depends on who's holding your hand and where are they leading you.
Absolutely. And I think these are very meaningful conversations that we are having through the medium of cam radio also, because just given what really is happening with the fintech space, we just have to look at that. And entrepreneurs need to sort of really understand that your path to success has to go through regulation. You need to understand the regulation. You need to understand the challenges and the changes that is happening in the regulatory space, especially in the sector that you're operating. My last question to you, Ashwin, now, and I think we had such a meaningful and interesting and what a lovely conversation. But any conversation healthcare is not complete without actually bringing out what is in the minds of a lot of people, which perhaps looks like an immediate solution, which of course is a fully implemented universal healthcare system. Do you think in a country like ours and where we are right now with that aspiration of becoming a 5 trillion economy, it is perhaps time that an idea has come in India? Or would there be issues when the rubber hits the road? Is universal healthcare feasible? Feasible just generically, perhaps it is, but in the context of a country like ours, do you think it is?
As a concept, universal healthcare is appealing. But when I look at it against the number, which is almost 150 crores, which is our population, it literally gives me shivers down my spine. How can you have universal healthcare for a country which has about 150 crore population? That's just I mean, it's mind-boggling. If we achieve that, I think it's going to be and if we achieve that in proper effectuality, if we achieve that and have some level of success, I think that will be the biggest achievement of this country. Unfortunately, that number is very daunting. I'm pessimistic. Like I said, I'm very pessimistic on this front. It's really difficult, given the sheer size of our population, given the length and the breadth of our country, given the remoteness of so many areas of our country, and most importantly, given the lower amounts of budgetary allocations. We have a higher budgetary allocation for defense than we have for healthcare. It all starts from there. If the budgetary allocation is increased, there could be a possibility to provide better healthcare facilities for certain sections of the society at for free or maybe at highly subsidized rates. You cannot have that for everybody, for the simple reason of the sheer investment that it takes to establish a good level. I'm not talking about the top level, but a good level healthcare establishment with basic facilities. So again, it's a question of budgetary allocation. But then again, we've seen universal healthcare across the world. In some countries, it has been extremely successful, primarily because of the lesser population numbers. In some countries like UK, the NHS services are touted amongst the best. The quality is there, but again, there are sheer wait times to get basic treatment. So it's a daunting task. I don't think in India, universal healthcare for everybody will ever be there. But I think the government is taking steps to make healthcare affordable. You have the Ayushman Bharat scheme, you have government insurance schemes, but I think a lot more needs to be done. And since we are entering budget season, I think the budgetary allocation needs to be increased for making infrastructure and for ensuring that the common people, the underprivileged sections, can have access to proper basic healthcare. I'm not talking about high-end healthcare. I'm talking about proper basic healthcare that they need for survival. So all eyes are on the Honorable Finance Minister now.
Thanks for that, Ashwin. And like you rightly said, all eyes are on the Honorable Finance Minister. Let's hear from her. What really do we have in store, especially for healthcare? But what a lovely conversation and so much food for thought across pricing control, policy making for the MSME space, allocation for healthcare vis-a-vis defense or whatnot. Thank you so much, Ashwin. Until the time we see you next, goodbye and good luck. And I do hope our listeners thoroughly enjoyed the conversation of today on CAM Radio. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shrija.